All right, team, we are back in the Fireside PM podcast, and I have Aniket in the show today. He and I crossed paths at Google when he was a rising star as one of our, highly selected interns, and now he's at Workday, leading interesting things and writing some Substacks about the industry. So welcome to the show, Aniket. I can't wait for us to chat a little bit.
It's good to be here, Tom. You've been such a good friend and mentor of mine. I'm excited to chat. We always have some good chats, so it'll be good to could do one on the Fireside podcast.
Yeah, I seem to recall we had some good conversations in our one-on-ones at work, and of course they would be about project stuff, but sometimes they would go broader, and those are always fun. So yeah. I also noticed there's a ton of Kellogg alumni representation in the RSVPs for this interview. So I think some of the Kellogg mafia has heard about this.
Oh yeah. If they, I don't know if you can do any emojis or whatever, but the Kellogg folks watching this.
Did I tell you that I have relatives connected with Kellogg? Did I mention that to you already?
Sister cousin is a professor.
Yeah, Angela Lee. She teaches marketing at Kellogg, which I heard they have a decent marketing department over there.
It's okay. I heard it's better than Harvard.
Yeah. Harvard's more of a general management place.
Yeah, tell me the last time Harvard and marketing were in a sentence.
Harvard does not need marketing, Aniket, as you know. At any rate, well, let's talk a little bit about your background. We, where did you grow up, and then what did you do before B school and after B school, and what do you do now? And then we'll dive into the AI and SaaS stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Little bit about myself. I'm from the Bay Area, so tech were dinner table conversations at home, all the way from agile methodology as a little kid to my dad teaching me about databases with grains of rice. So, tech was always ingrained. I initially wanted to be a lawyer because I saw 3 seasons of the TV show Suits, but then switched to CS. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And so I started my career off as a software engineer. I moved to product management and then got the MBA to upskill myself as a product manager, try to think on a more holistic level. Got to cross paths with you over at Google. And then I recently came back to Workday. It's been a year now. So yeah, I've been in different industries, not just Workday, B2B enterprise software, but also IoT. I got a chance to do that at GE Digital, and then got to try venture capital as well. So not just the operator side, but also how investors think. So I think that's why you and I get along so well, just like such a wide variety of different places.
If there were a liberal arts career in tech, you've done it already in that you've kind of gotten a whole variety of perspectives about this, from the investor to the operator, to the startup, to the established leader. So that's awesome. I was actually giving advice to someone earlier this week. They were asking me about business school. And they were like, hey, I've been out of undergrad for a few years now, and I want to get into product management. Should I just jump into a startup, or should I go to B school? I'm guessing you get that question from time to time. Like, what do you tell people?
Oh man, it's such a nuanced question. I'm curious your thoughts as well, because you probably have the longer view perspective. My perspective is pretty short term as of late. I do think in the short term, you can't go wrong. Like whether it was B school or joining a startup, you learn more hands-on skills, and you probably save some money as well. But I do think what business school does offer is like more of like a book knowledge on things. So like you get to actually, you learn systems and frameworks, whereas, if you're a little hands-on, sometimes you lose the forest for the trees. So Probably a mix of both. I have found that B school opened my eyes into a different lever for how to move the needle for the business. So, an example of that is, as an engineer, the only needle I knew how to pull was building better, or like building faster, being more performant. And then, like, initially as a product manager, I was like, okay, how do we build the best product? But now with B school, there's more levers. Like, can we put more on marketing spend, or can you put more on sales? Are you a sales-led growth company, or maybe is the financial structure of your organization, like, how is it, more debt or more equity? Depending on that, there are other ways to move the needle for the business. And so I do think like B school gave me that higher view perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me your take. You're like, you've been, now
I've
you
been
have
out for a little while.
yeah.
Yeah, what I told her was kind of similar to your observation around the importance of seeing the forest from the trees and zooming out and learning frameworks. The other thing that I have observed is, if you're an intellectually curious person and you think business is really cool and interesting, spending 2 years at a B school, learning all of the fundamentals and then going deep in a few areas and learning alongside people from all over the world, from all different industries and backgrounds, like, that is freaking awesome. And so I told her, I was like, look, if you have an opportunity to attend a program where it's going to be really well resourced and you're going to be learning alongside really accomplished people and have great, professors and a great alumni network, it's generally a very long-term positive move. The only times I've told people maybe not is if they've already reached a certain stage in their career where, let's say, they've been out of undergrad for like 7 or 8 years, then it's like, okay, it might still make sense. But at some point, you're kind of going to be a little out of step with the rest of your cohort. And then the recruiters are going to be recruiting for like L4 jobs, but maybe you're already an L5 or an L6 or something like that. So that'll be, that's the one caveat. But I'm a big fan. I mean, I've even gone back for exec ed repeatedly. Like, I just love it. I can't get enough of it. So, and I haven't.
School for sure was fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as much as I loved undergrad, I relished going to B school class, and as long as I didn't have to open the case, I felt fine. But yeah, there was always that moment where you're like, please do not call on me to open this case. But I even did just actually like a couple weeks ago, I was in New York doing a consulting project for a company that's building out their product management capabilities, and we did the case method for part of the workshop. It was fantastic. And I was able to cold call. So that was fun.
That's fun. You switch tables. You're on the
That's right. That's right. Does anybody remember, anything in the exhibits that support this point? So anyway,
I loved like the curtain call sometimes when like the protagonist of the case is actually on the Zoom call or in the back of the classroom just listening.
I love that. Yeah. Because you're always like, who's that dude? Oh, that's going to be interesting. Yeah. So that's cool. Now you've also, while you've been working, you've been observing the industry, and I mean, all of us are living through a really, I think what most of us think is a historic time. What has been your kind of general feelings about the emergence of Gen AI and how it's going to change things in general? And then we can go into what it means for SaaS giants.
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. It really is exciting. I'm trying to think of the last time, at least in my career, when I've been so excited by a new emergence of a technology. I think crypto had its fun moment. Probably there was a little bit of motion with mobile. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
probably past I was early in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Another big trend during my career was like moving to cloud. I think
Oh.
that was another big trend. But this one, it feels like it is the loudest, is the most emergent of all of these trends. And I've been excited personally, just like with my methods of work have changed
Mm-hmm.
significantly, trying to use a lot of these different tools. Like, how do I make my own workflow and automation go faster? Even
Mm-hmm.
images generated out of for some of the blog posts, they're all generated using AI. It does feel like there's something really valuable here. Now, what that is, I think it's worth a discussion either here or elsewhere. But I do think the next 5-10 years will be significantly different from what we imagine our day to day is right now.
Yeah, you bring up cloud, and I actually was discussing on this podcast with my good friend Rahul Mahendale about AI stuff, and we were talking about this analogy of the roads in Boston versus the roads in New York. And the roads in Boston being like these cow paths that they
Yeah.
paved over, and so now you can take a cow path faster. And then New York, which was like, no, we're gonna start this the right way and have grids and everything. And my sense is that with cloud, and you just started to see software companies emerge that would never have existed before, or with mobile, like you saw like Uber emerge where, without smartphones, it wouldn't have been possible. Or with internet, you have like marketplaces like eBay that would never existed. So those are all like New York grids. Like what I've seen so far personally with AI, both as a consultant, but also as an investor, is a lot of progress using AI to pave over the cow path. So I have an existing workflow. I'm going to cut some steps out of it, or I'm going to make certain steps take a minute when it would normally take an hour or two or a day. But they didn't fundamentally change the business. They were like extracting cost out of it and maximizing productivity. And I'm curious, have you observed more of the New York stuff, or are you also seeing a lot of Boston kind of implementations?
Wow. Is it fair to summarize like Boston being, we're on some very old, inefficient systems. Let's make this smoother. And then New
Yeah.
York being, what's the new cool stuff we can build? Is that a
Yeah.
fair
We're going
summary?
to do it completely different. Um, you could argue, you could use the term AI first for New York, but for all of the startup pitches I've seen that are AI first, I'm like, well, it looks like you've taken an existing workflow and you've automated a bunch of steps, which is great, but this is not a new thing.
Yeah.
Which then leads to the question of like, why can't the incumbent just add this as a feature
Yeah.
and compress the workflow themselves? So yeah, that would be kind of the summary. Like, if you've got a true New York style AI business, it has to be something that never existed before. It can't be a faster version of what already existed, because that's like the Boston style, which is not it doesn't mean that doesn't work. It just means that may have different economics in terms of outcomes and things like that.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because let's go back. Let's suppose we're like mobile is just becoming like a big thing right
Mm-hmm.
now. So if mobile's becoming big, what changed so that Uber became that platform between buyer and supplier? Did potentially there was that opportunity over on the internet, but it just wasn't accessible? So
yeah, I mean, I think with Uber, you had the real-time tracking of the car, you had mobile payments, and you had this marketplace where anyone that they didn't have to have a medallion, they could just become a driver. You had this idea of like a part-time driver, which I think would have been harder in the yellow cab days. So all of that came together to create a brand new company versus like all the yellow cab people just making their processes a little more efficient.
Yeah, I
and
see.
so where I can't name a company other than ChatGPT and Claude. I can't name another product where I'm like, oh, that never existed. Like I'm doing solving a problem in a completely different way. So it doesn't mean that we have to have those iconic new categories created, but I think it does lead into why I kind of agree with you that the enterprise SaaS giants, like, I don't think that, if you're Salesforce, that you're going to be, overrun tomorrow by some startup that just raised, whatever, 50 million bucks, because what are they doing? They're using Gen AI to write things to send to customers, or using AI to summarize stuff that they get from customers. Like these are all features that some PM in Salesforce is probably working on. There's probably a whole team of them.
Yeah.
So, but maybe that's a good segue into your Substack post. Like tell me a little bit about how it came about and what you learned.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I will say, just a final thought on the Boston versus New York thing.
Mm-hmm.
It really does feel like AI is it's a way to enhance current workflows.
Yeah.
So if I saw this framework, I don't know who it was, and it's not my own. There's like probably 4 different value adds to AI. So the first one being like you enhance your current products. So like Netflix's recommendation system, or you have an assistant that's helping you out with Siri or something like that. You can improve your operational efficiencies. So like now you can have, for example, I don't know, better forecasts, or better maintenance, something like that. You know that this product is going to degrade in 10 years, and you're very exact about that. You probably have better customer sales engagement. And then the last one is like new insights. But that to me seems like the blackest box. Like, what are these new insights that'll come from AI? So for all these use cases, it really has felt like improving the Boston roads, or like improving, but not like all these new things. That who's to say, like, are we just too early? Like we don't have the vision for it yet, or maybe the technology isn't revolutionary enough. Maybe we need a couple more crazy inventions to get there. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, it has been, it feels like at least a couple of years now since ChatGPT came out. And part of me feels like, it's not crazy to have expected some startup to, other than ChatGPT, to kind of take the world by storm. What I see instead is a lot of information workers, knowledge workers using one of the chatbots to cut their work time in half and sometimes come up with slightly better work product. But they really are literally going from riding around on horses on the Boston roads and now riding on mopeds, on
the Boston roads. Yeah.
Right? They're not getting in a helicopter and just, going right across Boston Common or whatever. Yeah. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that takes us. But tell us a little bit about this post.
Yeah, so how did this post come about? Obviously, AI has been like pretty hyped up over the last year, and I thought to myself, okay, let's go back to the first principles. AI is a new technology. New technologies are potentially disruptors for the market. And so strategically, what does this mean for the incumbent, and what does this mean for new entrants? If we think about this like a chessboard, what is the logical move for both parties? Like, what is the new entrant going to do, or what should they do? And then the incumbent, right? You know, they're smart folks. They have a ton of money and ton of resources. What will they do to defend their market share? So, thinking about this, I thought about this from the perspective of these large enterprise SaaS companies. So, Salesforce, Intuit, Adobe, Workday. Like, what is their logical move on this chessboard to defend their market share against, you know, these AI new entrants? And as I thought about it, I realized, you know, as hyped up as AI is, these enterprise SaaS giants can probably take a measured approach. They can probably wait, and they don't need to be the first mover in this. They can kind of see where the market, the direction is going. And if they probably play their cards right in the long term, I think they will win out. They do have the advantage of the data and the APIs. That was one thing I wrote in the article. So I think in the long run, they probably will win out. And so the thesis behind the post was these enterprise large SaaS companies, they really can take a measured approach. They don't need to, you know, go as fast as they can, pedal to the metal. I think they can wait it out.
Yeah. So which I think you could argue if you had posted this a year ago, I think a lot of people would have said, oh, Aniket, like you're underestimating the power of AI. It's going to turn everything upside down. This is the equivalent of like, this is more than the .com rush or movement to cloud. This is like the invention of electricity. And but I tend to agree with you that the incumbent SaaS players, while they have to move quickly, mainly to compete with other incumbent SaaS players who are adding all the AI kind of bells and whistles, but they're not. I don't think they're as under threat. Like if you said, oh, you know, let's say everybody uses like, I don't know, some SaaS offering to manage their recruiting as a company. Like, are they going to be leapfrogged by some startup that's done a bunch of AI stuff that's still trying to help enterprises recruit? I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, what would they do? They would use it to summarize applications, maybe write job descriptions, transcribe and summarize interviews, maybe conduct interviews. But all of those things, some of the existing kind of talent management platforms can just add. And then you don't have to get a customer to adopt a new workflow, which is usually the biggest obstacle.
Yeah.
So you lay out some specific reasons why the enterprise SaaS, you had 3 factors. Let's talk about those.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's a measured take. So happy to chat about them. So I think the first one is an open question. I lean towards no, but is there really a first mover advantage for, you know, an AI new entrant to disrupt market share from an enterprise SaaS company? And I don't think so. And I think the big reason I have here is, you know, these LLMs, they're kind of becoming a commodity as of late. So it does feel like Claude or ChatGPT or Mistral or whatever foundational model. Are they really that different from one another? And so because of that, if you're building something on top of these foundational models, anybody can do the same thing. And so these large enterprise companies, even if they're not the first mover to have these AI features, is there that much of a disadvantage to being, you know, a fast follower to this? And I don't think there is. So that was probably the first reason. And then a subpoint bullet B on the article was that the Pareto principle. So I think as we know, and during our time at Google, you can get 80% of the accuracy with 20% of the cost for a lot of these AI models. But the real value, or like how do you get to 100%? That's very expensive, that last 20%. And so how valuable is that last 20%? I think for a lot of these use cases for enterprise software, that last 20% is not as valuable. So it's really easy to get to the 90% solution.
Yeah, I will share an example. I think in January or so of this year, maybe it was February, I was testing a bunch of different AI tools, like around note taking. And, I tested read.ai and Otter and like 3 or 4 other ones. And what I found was, well, first I liked read.ai the most, but what I also found was that they were all adding all of these features. But ultimately, I really just needed the recording, the transcription, and maybe sometimes the 1-paragraph summary of the meeting. But all the other stuff they had around, like, oh, here's the meeting trailer, or here were the percent that you talked versus other people talking, or here was the mood of the people. Like, I was like, nah, I don't need any of that. And frankly, if Zoom or Google Meet just did a better job recording and sending out like a summary, like, I think that's probably good enough.
Yeah.
I had a similar test with AI first PowerPoint killers.
Okay.
And, you type in a prompt and it create a whole deck, and it was like really whiz bang. And I ended up comparing those. I found Gamma to be the best. But I'll be honest, after a month or two, I went back to Google Slides because ultimately I need a presentation package to do a lot of things, not just generate slides from a small prompt. And all of these startups, did a decent job stitching together a few models to kind of do some cool whiz bang stuff. But, they were kind of like great demonstrations of what AI can do, but they weren't kind of like end-to-end solutions.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going back to the incumbent offerings and waiting for them to add a couple of AI things, and that's good enough for me. So yeah, I do think for many of these AI startups, you wonder, is the first 10% of what they built good enough? And why wouldn't the incumbents just close that gap? And most people don't need the last 90% even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think you brought up 2 points that kind of do tie into points 2 and 3 is the value add of the AI going or integrating with the rest of your workflow. And if I already am on Google Slides, and on Google Slides, I have my Google Doc that's automatically linked in, with my Google Calendar and all this stuff, like it just is so much friction to have, another AI tool and then bring it back into your existing workflow. And then this is on steroids when you're thinking about enterprise software, because now that enterprise software uses this particular data model, how do you take it out of the data model? You have your own pipeline. Now you need to have a data transformation layer. It's like just on steroids when you think about it in terms of enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I've worked on projects where we had to move customers within the same company from one version of the product to another version of the product. And it was freaking hard getting them to just switch from, Acme version A to Acme version A2. And you're like, well, how the heck is some startup supposed to get these enterprises to switch off? Especially when there are so many brittle integrations that if a company's been dependent on it, like they're lit. So if let's say if Gamma reached out to me and say, hey, Tom, we noticed you stopped using Gamma and you've gone back to Google Slides. What would it take for you to change it? The list of things that I would give them would be pretty long. And then I think what makes it harder for them is that the list of things you would give them would be similarly long and we wouldn't overlap perfectly.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look up and you're like, shit, I got to rebuild Google Slides and add all this AI stuff and then integrate as well with Calendar and Gmail and everything else. And you could use the same thing for PowerPoint and Outlook and whatever alternatives. But I do think it will be challenging for these AI products that are taking on incumbents to sustain. And there's probably going to be a reckoning probably early next year when they run out of this round's money and they need to raise another round. And yeah, I guess it'll be kind of fun to see like, okay, well, who emerges? Because whoever emerges out of this one in 2025, they're probably onto something.
I agree. Yeah, I do think very hot. I don't know. Just a take. Let me know what you think about it.
Yeah, go for it.
Application layers of AI, they're going to have a harder time, but things deeper in the tech stack, like maybe a layer that just sits between the foundational model and your enterprise software. So maybe like an orchestration layer or an agent layer between, you know, different companies. Those might be successful.
Yes. I took a flyer on a startup earlier this year called Multion, which does like a bunch of agent kind of like a large, you know, action model that does a bunch of tasks from using your browser to kind
of better Zapier, like, or
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, because I was like, all right, yes, I see that because I can't do that with ChatGPT. I can't book the flight. I can't make the reservation. And what I like about them is at least their MVP, you know, doesn't require API access to all these other companies. Just acts as you in your browser. That's one of their kind of early use cases. So I agree with you that that maybe that middle layer could be interesting. I've also gone even further upstream and made some investments in nuclear power generation.
Oh, you downstream. You're deep.
Yeah, but downstream, upstream, however you want to look at it. Yeah, but far away from the application layer.
Yeah, very far away.
Yeah, because
I'm like some energy to figure this one out.
Yeah, because I'm like, well, with everybody hopefully moving to EVs, heat pumps, induction cooking, and running like massive amounts of AI, you know, computations every second, and the desire for some of that power to be continuous, reliable, and carbon free. You know, these small modular reactors like might be useful. Obviously, there's the Fukushima risk and everything like that. Yeah. But ask me in 10 years, maybe that'll pay off.
10 years, there'll be fusion.
Yeah, seriously, nuclear will be old school. Will be like, what? That's like the coal of 2035.
But you bring up an interesting point. That is actually fascinating, which is the Metreon, you said?
Multion.
They are they're acting as you and not using APIs, where I do think like the APIs are probably an area where the incumbents can protect themselves. So, you know, I have access, if I'm the incumbent, I have access to the data. So that'll make my models in the long term smarter than yours because your models are probably on publicly trained data. I've got the public and the private. And then I've got access to the APIs. But you bring up a good point is if you can act as the user and, you know, log in, is that a way to get around? And then, you know, now I'm just talking out loud. It seems similar to me with the Siri or like the voice folks. Yeah. So there were two ways to solve that problem. The first one was it's all APIs and actions. So all these voice Siri or Alexa, they're all just using APIs under the hood. But another way to solve that problem is using the accessibility controls of your mobile or web browser, where it's as if it's clicking the button or it's clicking the next. But maybe it's like performance or not, but what ended up winning was the actions and the APIs and so maybe there is something to take away for this new wave of automation as well. Will it be the actions and the APIs, or will it just be a way to automate things on the browser or your mobile?
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's definitely early days. We actually have a chat comment here from Mr. X. Shout out to the classic book Innovator's Dilemma. I think everyone trying to force AI into current workflows and existing products might want to read that book again. Did you read that book back at Kellogg? I know it wasn't a Kellogg guy, but
Clayton Christensen is one of my absolute favorites. The book that I like is How to Measure Your Life, but I did read Innovator's Dilemma as well. Yeah. Mr. X, I think this is Kirk. Of mine. Yeah.
Oh, is he a Kellogg man?
No, he's a Workday man.
Yeah. Oh, well done. Yeah. So, actually, let's take Mr. X's point there. By the way, I had the privilege of being a student of Clay Christensen's.
Oh my God!
And took his Innovators Dilemma. Yeah, it was a second year class.
Wow.
And he was not an easy grader at all. And he would push back. Even anytime you made a comment, like usually you can make a comment and then you're done. But he would challenge you a little more than some other professors would. But just amazing guy and obviously a brilliant mind. In terms of the Innovator's Dilemma applied to Gen AI, I think if Clay were here, he would say, okay, well, if all you're doing is kind of tweaking and making existing workflows a little more efficient and faster, you look like a classic incumbent. And the threat to you will be someone that comes up with a completely new way of doing it, the equivalent of the mini mills in his example for steel production. So let's take the PowerPoint example with like Gamma. So like if the Gamma founders would say, I'm not trying to replace Google Slides or PowerPoint. I just have a whole new way of helping business professionals storytell. And you're going to look at it and say that it's inferior, but that is exactly the path that the sort of disruptive technology is taking, because you don't get that we're coming at this from a completely different angle. And by the time you do, the utility will surpass the incumbents and you'll be dead.
Clay had he had a disruption framework. I don't know, didn't he?
Yeah.
Christensen, it was like innovators or incumbents have to keep having sustaining disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's low market disruption. So can you make something cheaper? And then new market disruption. Like, are there different parts of the market that you can attack that the incumbent maybe necessarily it's difficult for them to defend? So I'm trying to think about this from like the Gamma perspective. Maybe they're going after a market that has historically not been felt that Google's Slides or PowerPoint is useful for them for whatever reason. Or maybe they're going after the low market disruption, being like, okay, we can do this cheaper. We can do it. Yeah.
And I don't think any of those, I think Tome was another one. I tested like 4 or 5 of them. I think they all are trying to out PowerPoint and be like, oh, PowerPoint with a prompt, And I would actually challenge them to say, hey, why don't you just think about the problem or the job to be done that PowerPoint is trying to accomplish? It's trying to convince a bunch of people to do something or help them make a decision. Let's start there. And we don't have to kind of like ape the actions of PowerPoint. We can just redefine how business storytelling and conducting of meetings is done. Okay, that would be interesting. Like, I would be tempted to invest in that startup. I just haven't seen that.
You remember Prezi? those presidents.
Yeah.
That was a new way of doing things. The kids loved it.
Yeah, that had its moment. What happened to them? Are they not around anymore?
I don't know. It's worth Googling to see what happened.
Yeah. They were hot for like a year or so at least. Started seeing them a lot at conferences, I remember.
No way.
Oh. Yeah. People I think they like the animations and stuff. But yeah, I think that would be a good example also of a New York versus Boston approach, which is, hey, we have a completely different way of there's today in a business meeting, there's memos like Amazon method, and then there's slides, which is, let's say, Google method. And now there's the Gamma method. And it's neither of those two. And it's not a faster way to write memos, and it's not a faster way to create slides. That would be really intriguing. I just haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's a really good perspective.
You also called out some other factors. I guess part of it was like related to your point about APIs, about barriers to entry. So you've got switching costs. Maybe talk through some of these barriers to entry.
Yeah. So the thought process here was, as powerful as AI is, the incumbents just have enduring barriers for you to beat out. And so one, for example, is for enterprise SaaS companies, the switching costs are very high for customers. So the numbers I had here was, if you're having a contract that's more than $250,000 of annual contract value, well, your contracts are longer than 3 years. And so it is very tricky to switch from like one system to another system. And if you do have some new entrant AI enterprise software, well, it needs to be really good. Like it can't just be like 5% or 10% better than it has to be, 500%. You have to really beat out how hard and how high these switching costs are. And then the second sub point here on the deep domain knowledge is that I think in a lot of these enterprise solutions, I think there's a graph, more often than not, that there are maybe like 5 to 10 use cases that are used by 80% of all users. But then the true solution is those hundreds, maybe thousands of other use cases that you need as a cumulative part of your product in order for it to be something that's useful for an organization or company. And so what I mean by that is, maybe you're building out, take Workday, for example. You can build out like 5 or 10 of the most common use cases. But for an organization, it's not just those 5, 10 use cases. You need to match hundreds, thousands of use cases. And that comes from just time. It comes from a lot of time and deep understanding of the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, your point about the switching costs reminds me of I think the risk that a lot of startups encounter, which is, oh, hey, we got these famous companies to do a pilot with us. And I think the reality is that a company may choose to do a pilot, partly because they want to learn more about AI. They think it's cool. They want to tell their VPs that they're doing all these AI pilots. But they may have very little expectation that they're going to get rid of their current contract that's only in year 2, to kind of kick them out and take your thing over, which I think is also why 2025 will be a year of reckoning for a lot of AI startups who got some people to give their stuff an early try. But when it comes time for like putting real money down and committing to multi-year, let's say enterprise software agreements, they may not go there. And I think I think we saw a little bit of that in our time at Google, where there was always people that are willing to take the call because they're kind of curious about what you're up to. And they might even do a pilot. But when you're like, okay, now rip out your other thing and take us, it's a different conversation.
Yeah, put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. Everybody wants to watch a good demo and maybe give you like access to 30 users or whatever. But when it's like, no, we're going to change the workflow for your whole organization. We may not have every feature that the thing we're kicking out has. That is a very tough sell. And to your point on that graph, it could be that a very few features drive a lot of the value, but there's enough stakeholders that care about some random element of that long tail that are going to be like, no, you can't get rid of the existing thing. I need this report, or I need this random integration, or I need, this particular feature. And that's just going to pile up. And it's literally years of product development that went into that tail.
Yeah.
So, cool stuff. Let's see what your, okay, now you've got the incumbent advantage of data and APIs, which is, I mean, maybe just summarize this for the folks. I know we're running a little over time, but it's a great
I'm having fun. I can chat with you all day. Yeah, this really summarized here is a lot of the foundational models have been trained on public information, public knowledge, but a lot of the knowledge is private. And I stole this stat, so it's not mine. If you scroll down, I think it was Emergent Capital that put these numbers together. And then they just said, hey, take Zoom, for example, 3.3 trillion meeting minutes. And then Ironclad, 1 billion documents annually, and Slack, 1 billion messages per week. So there's like a trove of this enterprise data that's just ready to be used. And so let's suppose table stakes, everybody has the foundational models that are built on public data. Well, then now you can build smarter systems, but whoever has access to the data gets access to those smarter systems. And so maybe there is an advantage for these incumbents because they do have access to that data.
I'll share an example that I think relates to this point. I was actually giving some advice to a large company, and their problem was, hey, we do all of this UXR, and then they live, the insights are summarized in these PowerPoint decks. But then we do so many dozens and dozens of studies, and they, hundreds over the last few years. And all of the knowledge is in the UXR's heads or the people that were involved with it. But eventually they change teams, and then you end up duplicating studies or asking the same questions again. And so they wanted some help evaluating some startup kind of vendors that were pitching to them on like, oh, we'll summarize all this stuff. And
like, for example, like enterprise search.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I was like, well, where are all these decks today? And they're like, oh, they're in the SharePoint. And I'm like, okay, why not use SharePoint Copilot? Because like they have access to open AI models. You're already working with Microsoft in that way. And the argument was, well, we saw this demo from this startup and it's super cool. And I was like, I get it. But you really want to sign a new contract with another vendor who isn't going to replace SharePoint, but just suck the information out of it and let you search it? Like, there are probably better ways, cheaper ways to do this with less approvals required.
Yeah.
Now, in fairness to them, I was not blown away by the ease of use of Copilot so far on SharePoint. And similarly with Drive, it's a little better, but you could see like this path where like, well, if the incumbent has all the data and they have the workflow and they have the contracts, those are massive advantages over the startup that's like, hey, come use this thing that's AI first. It's like, well, as soon as those incumbents just do good enough AI, it's sort of like, oh, the Honda Accord may not have the fastest engine. It's not going to beat a Ferrari, but it's there and everybody knows Honda, and maybe it's the car you already have. So I do kind of agree with you on the switching costs. and the advantages that the incumbents have with the data, the fact that they can use their own APIs. They're not going to have to, those startups have to worry about getting cut off or rate limited or charged enormous amounts of money. It's not to say like those startups won't figure out, but the bar will be high. To your point, they're going to have to be, it can't be 10% better. If you're going to take that cost, you're going to have to wow the crap out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were saying that, that something that came to mind, maybe what a lot of pivots are going to happen is instead of building on the application layer, can we build tools so that these enterprise giants can integrate AI better into their systems? So maybe the entire pie will get bigger and they'll just, so in the Honda Accord example, for example, we'll help you with your piston, or we will be, the windshield wiper, or we'll help, with the oil change. And there'll be a lot of these startups focusing on that specific problem, making the car go faster in the end. Like the entire car just gets better.
Yeah, if you're an incumbent, maybe part of your goal is for the most important AI features. So like if you're Zoom, like you definitely want to nail recording, summarization. But, if you want to make an API available so that people can startups can build in existing enhancements to the Zoom experience, like, cooler emoticons or like mood detection or something, whatever, then that might be the smart play and you can platformize yourself and then grow the pie. I think the uncomfortable truth then is that from an investment point of view, it's hard to see those becoming unicorns. Yeah. Those windshield wiper kind of, aftermarket, exhaust systems or whatever for those who still have combustion cars. So yeah, I think that's the thing I don't know about. Like, I'm wondering who the hell, other than OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, maybe Scale AI, like some of these like infrastructure folks, like who's the unicorn AI app? I haven't found it. And I guess, maybe it's going to emerge soon, but we just haven't seen it yet. Unless something comes to mind for you, Aniket.
I mean, if I did know, it's my investment. Nothing does come to mind, and maybe it is something I'll have to do a little deeper think on. But yeah, in terms of your analogy on Boston roads versus New York roads, I like that. I'm going to steal that one. I'm trying to think, and not a lot come to mind in terms of like what are these new New York road applications?
Yeah, I think we're still they're probably out there. They're in stealth mode, or they just haven't kind of reached mainstream tech kind of observer radar yet. But I certainly haven't come across it. But when you got to believe, like with such a fundamentally different technology, there will be entirely new categories created. Maybe that's another way to put it, like entirely new categories being created versus existing categories cutting down their costs or increasing their kind of efficiency.
As you were saying, that something else that came to mind is maybe it's not one revolution, but a combination, or like something that's built on top of that. So take the internet, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Internet was nice. What made it accessible was the browser. And then after the browser, then we got things on top of, or like websites or applications. So maybe we need a couple more breakthroughs on top of LLMs or whatever else is the new revolution on AI. Maybe that's something that make it more accessible, or who knows? But like think an innovation on top of the existing innovation to make it more accessible to new things.
Yeah, that could be. It could be like we're seeing a bunch of the early kind of layers of AI innovation, and you need a certain number of them to kind of create those new categories when they all kind of line up. Which is, from an optimist point of view, means like we're just getting started. and the next Airbnb or Uber or eBay like has not yet been put out there. So let's everybody get to work, find that.
Maybe that's the Bay Area in us, but we're very techno optimists.
Yes, well, for sure. I mean, it is weird in that we all recognize, like, damn, this technology is so freaking powerful. And you would assume that it should create new categories, but maybe, if you go back in history, not all the time a technical innovation has the kind of seismic change in the actual kind of landscape for business competition. I would imagine it usually does, though. There's usually new things that come out. Maybe the question, and we'll wrap up with this, like people in the comments can share their thoughts. Is the answer already OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, Scale AI, like a few of those? Like, is that it? Are those the kind of iconic companies that are coming out of this era, or are there others that we haven't talked about?
It does feel like the most power, or like the most defensible, is the foundational models.
Mm-hmm.
Everything does integrate with the foundational model. So it does feel like that is probably the basis of a new AI tech stack. Everything is based off the foundational model. It is like the new AWS compute in some ways. But yeah, now my head is spinning. It's like, what else could be out there?
And even with those models, the performance of the second and third tier models keeps getting better. And the open source models are closing the gap.
That was a genius move by Zuckerberg to open source Llama. That was incredible.
Yeah. Like, you could argue that, is OpenAI really going to be the most valuable company 5-10 years from now? Or will they be like, Netscape or something? I don't know. So we'll have to see. But no matter what, we just hope they all consume tons of electricity.
and nuclear. Yeah.
That can only be met by small modular reactors. And if that's true, then the young grandchildren will have their college tuition taken care of. Anything else you want to share, Aniket, before we wrap up? It's been so fun to catch up and record.
No, I think we had a fun chat, and it was really good catching up with you. I always have a ton of fun exploring all these topics at like a very macro level. And I know you and I, if we really wanted to, we could go micro. So it is such a pleasure to catch up with you, and thank you for your friendship and the mentorship that we've had so far.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Are you going to be doing more stuff on your Substack, or what's your plan?
Yeah, we have a new one coming out. So this one is with a couple friends.
It will be posted on Aniket's Substack?
Yeah, it'll be shared. So it will be a cross post. You can have multiple people post. So we'll be co-authors on this. And
what's it going to be about?
We're thinking about like what are industries most prime for disruption? So given this, and then given some market dynamics, like what are the industries that are most prime for disruption?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're early stages in that I don't want to give a spoiler on what these industries are, but that's kind of what we're looking at. What are the most prime, and also like, what are the most defensible? What are the ones that are least primed for disruption as well?
Okay, so the first post was like, hey, big SaaS is probably not going to be heavily disrupted. So this next post will be, but blank is.
Yeah. Or like, what's a framework to figure out which ones are the most potential for disruption?
Where will web search fit into that analysis?
Who's to say? I love how Perplexity tackled that one. That's a fun. The CEO was on was on a podcast I listened to with Lex Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that was very fun. He got into the details of how Perplexity works, semantic search, combined with they do a lot of retrieval, same way that Google does. They crawl the web, but then they RAG on top of an LLM to get these search results. And I was like, wow, what a cool, interesting concept.
I will say with my own kind of researching behaviors, I find that I do go to ChatGPT right now more than Google search.
Wow.
And about 15% of the time I kind of get pissed at ChatGPT because I'm like, no, that's wrong. Double check. And then, oh, I'm so sorry. Blah, blah, blah. But, the other 85% of the time, it's just so great not to have to read through like 10 blue links and go to all these random sites and just get the answer instantly.
Yeah.
So I do wonder, like, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a case study written around the new search wars, right?
That's so fascinating. Like, if you go 5 steps down, like, why does somebody want to search something? Okay, well, I want to search something to get an answer so that I can craft my message in a beautiful way. Well, if you can just go to the end, like, I want to craft my message in a beautiful way, and you can do it on whatever, Claude, ChatGPT, or Perplexity, Gemini, I don't know, whoever does it. Well, then that saved 5 steps of your thought process for thinking.
Yeah. The worst thing is, maybe not the worst, but one of the disturbing things is, as an example, this morning, my youngest son was showing me how he was calculating how much he ran based on a certain route. And he was like, look, here's the math. And I'm like, this is a screenshot of ChatGPT. This is not math. And large models are sometimes can be pretty bad at math. And I was like, are you sure you could do these calculations on your own? And he was like, yeah, I was just busy. I'm like, but part of me, I'm like, oh no, they're going to lose the ability to like synthesize information,
Oh my
God.
Sometimes I ask myself, am I losing my ability to think? Am I not thinking well enough? Just depending on the AI to make a decision for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I and everyone watching this that's an adult is probably, I would argue, most powerful because we're able to use AI, but we're also able to like call BS on it.
Yeah.
But if you're in high school, like my 2 sons, I don't think they have enough track record without AI to actually see when the AI is messing up. And, it's sort of like if you gave first graders calculators and said, yeah, you don't need to learn math, just use this calculator, like they're going to get themselves into trouble down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like me already, like because of Google Maps, I have lost all sense of direction that I mean, if my phone's down, like I'll get lost like in the next town over. I'll be like, I don't know where the hell I am.
Yeah.
So
with Google Maps and the calculator, it's objectively right, or like most of the time it's right.
Yes.
Who's to say how right or wrong we are, at least right now, especially with hallucinations?
I know.
But
and bias the model too.
Bias, yeah. But assuming that, it does get better and it is right, then I can definitely see it taking over a lot of our decision making. Yeah. And maybe we'll just have higher orders of decision making. Like we won't think about the details as much anymore, and we'll just have higher orders of decisions that we'll have to make.
Yeah. I worry a little bit about when those details are overlooked or misinterpreted and then they get to us. It's like if you're in a business organization, you are relying on, let's say when we were at Google together, like I relied on the PMs to know deep down what was going on. They summarize it, give me the choices, then me and my manager will make we'll make a call and trade off. But we can do that because we trust our PMs
Yeah.
to kind of have it all down. And they're not like, can you imagine a PM that hallucinates? That person would be like, no, I don't want that guy on my team. He 10% of the time he makes up shit. You know, I mean, that maybe that's like a Wharton MBA or something.
Yeah, all the PMs watching, they're like, "Oh yeah, we don't hallucinate for sure. We just tell nice stories." Yeah,
yeah. So, but yeah, we'll have to get you back on. Maybe after you do your next post, we could kind of unpack it together.
yeah. Oh my God, for sure. We'll have to. This I don't think this could ever end. There's so many different ways we could take this. It's been a lot of fun.
I look forward to it, Aniket. Take care, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Have a good one. Bye. All right. Yeah, I'll tell you, one of my favorite things about being a PM leader is working with really bright, curious, inquisitive thinkers. And Aniket's one of those classic, kind of up and coming PMs that earnest and doing great work, and it's going to do good things. In terms of this conversation around AI incumbents, especially enterprise SaaS, which was the topic of Aniket's post. By the way, his Substack is, I'll put it in let me just put it on the screen here so you guys can all check it out. Add banner is right there. I think he's right. I think the incumbent SaaS folks are in a pretty good spot. I'd rather be them than a challenger. My second point is the winning challenger should not look like a faster version of the incumbent. Like if you take, let's say, ChatGPT and web search, Google search, the reason why I think it's become so popular is it didn't take the Google like type of thing will give you in a millisecond 10 blue links. It was like, hey, have a conversation with this all intelligent being and go back and forth with it. And I think anybody that's competing with, let's say, a SaaS player, if what they have is basically a modern visual design of the SaaS offering with a bunch of little sparkly AI bells and whistles, it begs the question, well, why can't the incumbent add those bells and whistles? Like, you don't think they have access to the OpenAI API? Now, so that's, and then, a good example of point two around how you've got to really fundamentally change the experience is our discussion of PowerPoint AI killers. And I think a lot of them are still basically in the business of slides, of creating slides. And I do wonder if they extrapolated and said, we're in the business of helping you tell a story. And moreover, helping you convince an audience or facilitate a conversation. Would they produce the slideware through prompts experience, or would it be something else? And I think the third point that we touched on with Aniket that I thought was really thought-provoking is, well, maybe the big win for AI is still out there, that you need a confluence of multiple innovations. So you're going to need the NVIDIA chips, you're going to need the OpenAI models, and you're going to need whatever, some orchestration or something. And then you're going to get these new categories created. And by the way, let me try and give credit. New York versus Boston roads and AI. I heard this at a Harvard Business School alumni reunion, and I think it was Professor Lakhani who used that example. Alumni reunion 2023, maybe. But yeah, I'll have to try and look it up because I feel like I need to give that person credit. Where the hell was that presentation? I think it was Lakhani, but I will, if it comes to me later, and I apologize to whoever was the professor who gave the whole Boston, New York example, but I think it's great and it stuck with me. I will look it up and post it in the future and make sure that if it's not Lakhani, they'll get some recognition. But yeah, those are my 3 takeaways that I think the incumbent SaaS players, they got the workflow, they got the data, they can add their own AI magic. I think they're generally okay. Number 2, if they're not okay, it's because someone came up with a fundamentally different way to do that job. It looks nothing like the way it's currently done. The workflow's entirely different. It's not, oh, I went from 5 steps to 3 steps. It's like, no, I went to 1 step and I'm coming at it from a completely different angle. And I think the third point is like, we're still on the lookout for that Uber, eBay, PayPal, Airbnb level win. And I'm not sure that it's OpenAI. Definitely think NVIDIA is going to do okay. And, selfishly, I'm big into nuclear, but also as a human that doesn't want more carbon. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you all thought about the conversation, and hope you enjoyed it. If you found it useful, do me a solid and like and share this out wherever you're watching it. And tomorrow or the day after, I will publish a new Substack, and it's usually a summary of these long live streams. Full disclosure, those summaries are partly generated by AI, but I review them all and I make sure they're accurate. So if you don't have time to listen to an hour-long live stream about enterprise SaaS and AI, you can subscribe to the Fireside PM Substack at firesidepm.substack.com. And then lastly, if you are a PM or if you lead a PM team and either you want one-on-one coaching or you want a workshop for your team to learn PM best practices, or if you need any fractional kind of CPO work, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to have a conversation and learn more and see if there's a way we can work together. All right, let's get back to work.